Go for main engine start. T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5. All three engines up and burning. 2, 1, 0, and liftoff. The final liftoff of Atlantis on the shoulders of the Space Shuttle. America will continue the dream.
Program, Houston. Roger, roll. Atlantis.
The video you just saw is one of those all of you has already seen several times in life. The start of a space shuttle is kind of iconic and often showed as an example for rocket launches even nowadays. When you ask anybody for a specific spacecraft, most people would name the space shuttle. But why? What made the space shuttles as special as they seem? All over the world we have many different astronautical companies and many other rockets. The Soyuz rockets, for example, are constantly bringing humans to space since 1966. The Saturn V gave us the opportunity to walk on the moon. So what was special about the space shuttle? Why does everybody and also every child know it, although it hasn't been flying for 10 years? That's one of the topics I want to attend in this video. The answer to the question about the particularities of the space shuttle is quite easy. Everything. In general, the space shuttles were the first reusable orbital spacecrafts. They brought the first American woman, the first African American, and many others to space, and mostly also back to Earth. They were the scene for the space labs, and their main work was to bring satellites to space. They were also the starting place for probes to explore the whole solar system. They deployed the Hubble Space Telescope and repaired and serviced it several times. The shuttle docked with space stations and also brought the modules to build up the International Space Station at about 400 kilometers altitude. To sum up, they did a really great job over the years. But what exactly is the space shuttle? Firstly, there isn't the space shuttle. It's a whole fleet of 5 shuttles and 1 test vehicle. Also, the word space shuttle mostly just means the orbiter itself. The official designation is STS, which stands for Space Transportation System. It covers the combination of the orbiter, the external tank, and the boosters. The historical program began with the first test flight in 1977 with the test vehicle Enterprise, and ended up with the last flight of Atlantis in 2011 after 133 successful flights. And just a short fun fact, the test orbiter Enterprise was planned to be called Constitution, but many thousands of people wrote letters to the president and demanded to call the shuttle after the Star Trek spacecraft USS Enterprise, and the president agreed. In addition to this, when the Enterprise had its first rollout and was officially presented to the public, the band played the Star Trek theme song, and also Leonard Nimoy, who's known as Mr. Spock, held a speech.
I'd like to introduce the Honorable Barry Goldwater, the ranking minority member of the Committee on Aeronautical and Space Sciences of the United States Senate.
The original concept intended a spacecraft that can be fully reused and ferries a crew of 4 and about 20,000 pounds of cargo. Because these plans were pretty expansive, after the shuttle program was accepted by the president, the NASA asked the Air Force to use the shuttles for their missions as well. But to get their commitment, they had to do some changes, like build bigger crew compartment that can house up to 10 persons, and they also changed the tank into a non-reusable external tank and added some boosters to lower the costs. That was the final concept of the space shuttle. So now let's have a look at these iconic orbiters. These were the 5 in-space operating shuttles. It started with Columbia, Challenger, Discovery, and Atlantis. The Endeavour was built after the loss of Challenger in 1986. Columbia wasn't replaced after 2003 because it was already known that the shuttle program will be retired. You can see all of the shuttles look quite similar and have design elements and capabilities of a rocket and an aircraft. That allows its vertical launch and its landing as a glider. It has a length of more than 37 meters and a wingspan of nearly 24 meters. Inside it has a 3-deck crew compartment, which is the only constant pressurized habitable area. Behind the payload bay were satellites and, for example, the space lever is stowed. There were plans for special passenger modules which can be put into the payload bay, where up to 74 people could find place. In the back it has several different engines for the launch as well as to navigate in space. The external tank has a height of 47 meters and contains separate tanks for liquid oxygen and liquid hydrogen. It separates from the orbiter about 18 seconds after main engine cutoff. The tank was the only major component of the system that was not reused. The rocket boosters at both sides of the system provide about 71% of thrust during liftoff and ascent. With a 45 meters height and 3.7 diameters per booster, they were the largest solid rockets ever flown. The boosters were dropped about 2 minutes after launch and returned to the ocean by the use of a parachute. And that leads us to the launch of the Space Shuttle. The testing phase began with the arrival of Enterprise. At first it underwent flight testing with the SCA, the shuttle carrier aircraft. That's a Boeing 747 that had been modified to carry the orbiter. In February 1977, Enterprise began the approach and landing tests and underwent captive flights. In August it conducted its first glide test, where it detached from the SCA and landed on its own. After 4 additional flights, Enterprise underwent shake test and the mated vertical ground vibration test, where it was attached to an external tank and solid rocket boosters and underwent vibrations to simulate the stresses of launch. In April 1979, it was taken to the Kennedy Space Center, where the final steps and preparations for a launch were practiced.
America's first space shuttle, and the shuttle has cleared the tower. 2, 1, down. Those gears kept me. 5, 4, 3, touchdown. Look about, skipper.
In 1980, Columbia was mated with its external tank and solid rocket boosters and was moved to the launch complex. The first space shuttle mission, STS-1, was the first time NASA performed a crewed first flight of a spacecraft. In April 1981, the Space Shuttle launched for the first time and was piloted by John Young and Robert Crippen. During the 2-day mission, they tested equipment on board the shuttle and found several of the ceramic tiles had fallen off the top side of Columbia. But nevertheless, they re-entered the atmosphere and landed successfully. All shuttles started from the Kennedy Space Center, although another launch site existed in the Space Launch Complex at Vandenberg Air Force Base. The countdown begins at T-minus 43 hours and counting, when they start to make their STS ready for flight. In the next hours there will be many build-in holds, what means that the countdown is interrupted for some hours in which selected work has to be done. Afterward, the countdown goes on until the next hold. For example, in the T-minus 6 hours build-in hold, they are loading the external tank before checking it again. At T-minus 3 hours and holding, the crew is brought into the orbiter and the weather is checked another time. The last build-in hold is at T-minus 9 minutes, when the NASA crew can finally decide to go or no go. At T-minus 0 seconds, the main engines already started and the solid rocket boosters ignite. The shuttle stack lifts off. About 8 minutes later, the main engines cut off and seconds later the external tank is separated. In most cases, after the shuttle lifted off without exploding, what by the way never happened, everyone was happy and celebrated the successful start. But 2 times NASA and also the whole world received a big frustration, with all in all 14 lost lives. The first big catastrophe was the explosion of Space Shuttle Challenger just 73 seconds after launch in January 1986.
3, 2, 1, and liftoff. Liftoff of the 25th Space Shuttle mission, and it has cleared the tower.
Control program. Forward throttle up. Forward throttle up.
1 minute 15 seconds. Velocity 2,900 feet per second. Altitude 9 nautical miles. Downrange distance 7 nautical miles.
This strategy seems to be the biggest setback in the history of the space shuttles. The whole crew, including the first non-astronaut space traveler, a teacher who wanted to be an idol for normal people, died because the management of NASA ignored the warnings of the design engineers. They knew that the O-rings between booster segments couldn't resist low temperatures under 12 degrees because they also were damaged after every other flight and had to be replaced regularly. And that's exactly what happened. One of those O-rings failed and hot gases escaped the booster sections and burned up. The other catastrophe was the disintegration of Space Shuttle Columbia at its re-entry into the Earth's atmosphere in 2003. This time it was a piece of foam separating from the external tank just some moments after liftoff and striking the leading edge of the orbiter's left wing. As you can see in the picture, it punctured one of the reinforced carbon-carbon panels that covered the wing edge. While orbiting, the engineers requested that the astronauts may be allowed to leave the shuttle to inspect the damage, but again NASA management refused the request and accepted to risk those lives. And in this case there were 7 lives lost. But since that day, NASA always kept a rescue flight in store, which was ready to launch if something with the current shuttle was wrong. Safety analysis predicted the chance of deadly failure as 1 to 100. But looking back to earlier missions, the risk was found to be as 1 out of 9. So that was pretty risky, and we can be happy that there weren't more accidents.
Roger, roll, Atlantis.
In addition to this, NASA always had the problem that they didn't fulfill their announcements. They planned to produce a reusable spacecraft system to lower the costs for spaceflight. In 1982, they published that they can lower the costs to $260 million per flight by 24 flights per year over 1 decade. But looking back, we can assume that the per launch cost was about $1.6 billion at a total budget for the whole Space Shuttle Program of $221 billion. In 2004, the retirement of the Space Shuttle Program with the completion of the ISS was announced. All 3 active shuttles had their last flight in 2011, ending up with the last flight of Atlantis in July. Afterwards, they and also the test vehicle Enterprise were brought to different visitor complexes where you now can look at them. I told you just some of the downsides this program had, but you have to keep in mind what big achievements we got due to the space shuttles. Every astronautical program is two-sided regarding human life, and those people who gave their lives for this program are kind of heroes. I personally am a big fan of the shuttles, and I think that those failures are worth it, although one could have prevented those, but it leads us into the right way for the future. Thanks for watching.
Landing gear down lock. Main gear touchdown. Nose gear touchdown.